82 years old, and I realized I was alone on a Tuesday night in early November. Not the type of alone where the house is still for a few hours, the kind that seeps in your bones and tells you there's nobody coming. It was raining that night, and I remember because the gutters were overflowing, and I kept intending to call someone to clean them. I would say, my husband will take a look, or my son knows someone. But that night there wasn't anyone to call, and I knew finally that there hadn't been for a long time. You'd think an individual would know when they're alone, but that doesn't happen all at once. It thins gradually, like hair in a brush, one strand at a time. I had been sitting at the kitchen table with a half-eaten bowl of soup. The clock above the stove ticked more loudly than normal. I remember I looked at my phone and turned it face down, then turned it back over again. There was no one I anticipated hearing from. That was the part that hurt. Not that no one had called, but that I wasn't waiting for nobody. At 82, you see time in a different way. These days, I don't buy green bananas. I don't start loan books. I think about the calendar year and count things by winners. Maybe 2 more, maybe 3 if I'm lucky. There's something final about it that we find both frightening and honest. But that night wasn't only about my age. It was in the past all the years leading up to it. When I was a child, I wasn't alone. I married at 23. I figured that was what adult women did. His name was Thomas. He was steady, reliable. Now a man who wore the same style of shoes for 30 years. I loved him the way young women love men who make them feel safe. We had 2 kids by the time I was 30. I worked part-time until they started school, and then full-time. I like being busy, I told myself. I like the praise. I like that people depended on me. My life of carpools, grocery lists, staff meetings, and school concerts was a blur in my 30s and 40s. I was always slightly late, slightly tired, slightly distracted. Thomas would attempt to communicate with me in the evenings. He would sit at the edge of the bed and we'd discuss his day. I'd nod and continue folding laundry. He once said to me, "You are always somewhere else." I laughed and said, "That's what you get when you have responsibilities." I thought we had time. It was always my response to everything. "We'll take a trip next year. We'll sit on the porch more once things settle. We'll have a proper conversation when the kids are grown." The kids did grow up. They departed so quietly as children do. One by one, their rooms cleared out. I cried when each of them left home, but I was also proud. That's how you're meant to feel. The house became cleaner, quieter. I started working more hours. It felt easier than just being in the silence. Thomas retired at 65. I was still working. He began to wait for me at dinners. I could tell in his face that twinge of disappointment when I'd call and say I'd be late again. There was always something that felt like it had to be done urgently. A deadline, a challenge only you could scale. He took to going on solitary walks in the evenings. He'd ask if I wanted to come. Sometimes I did. Often I said no because I was tired. I can't remember the last we took together. The pivotal moment, though I didn't realize it then, was when I was 71. Thomas had a stroke. It wasn't dramatic. He did not fall to the ground or scream. At breakfast, he merely slurred his words and dropped his coffee cup. At the hospital, I sat next to his bed and held his hand. I remembered it as being smaller than I expected. He gave me a look of confusion that frightened me more than the machines. He lived, but he was not the same. He moved slower. He forgot things. He needed me, and I was there. I drove him to therapy. I dosed out his pills into little plastic containers. I cooked softer foods. I did everything I was supposed to do. But I can't lie now. There were times I felt resentful, not at him, at the timing. I had just retired. I had plans in my head, trips we never took. I didn't say it out loud, but I thought we were supposed to have time now. He died 3 years later, quietly, in his sleep. People brought casseroles. The children flew in. For a few days, the house was noisy and footstepped, perfumed and cologne. Then they left. I stood at the front door after my daughter drove away, her car out of sight down the street. I waved until she went around the corner. When I returned inside, the house seemed to have exhaled, empty again. I told myself that this was widowhood. This was normal. Many women outlived their husbands. I joined a book club. I went to church on Sundays. I learned to factory reset the router. But something had changed long before Thomas died. We had become accustomed to living alongside one another instead of staring each other down. I had picked busyness over presence so many times that I didn't know how to sit still with someone anymore. The kids would call, but less and less as the years passed. They had their own families. I didn't want to be a burden. Thus, I limited conversations to short and cheerful. I'm fine, I say. Don't worry about me. I believed it. The night I discovered I was alone wasn't a dramatic one. There was no emergency, no fall, no flashing lights. Just the rain and a quiet clock ticking. I left the table and roamed through the house, extinguishing lights. I stopped in the hall where family photos are posted. Thomas in his brown suit. The children who are missing their front teeth. Me younger than I think I remember feeling at the time. I wanted to remember the last deep conversation I'd had with someone. Not about schedules or weather or medications. Something real. I couldn't. That scared me more than the quiet did. I moved into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. His side was still a little indented. I never replaced a mattress. I don't know why.
Perhaps I thought that it would sustain something. It was then that I understood I had constructed a life of doing things for people. And when there was no one to need me in that way anymore, I had lost track of who I was. Loneliness isn't loud. It's not all tears and dramatic phone calls. Sometimes it's simply warming up half a can of soup because preparing an entire meal seems pointless.
It's punching the gutter yourself and almost falling off the ladder because nobody is there to stabilize it. It's seeing a sunset and having no one to elbow and say, look at that. I don't regret my work. There is not a doubt in my mind to raising my children. I don't even regret marrying Thomas. I loved him. I still do. What I regret is taking for granted that there would be more time in which to pay attention, more evenings, more walks, more sitting next to him instead of in front of the clock and trying to put down the laundry. I regret the small dismissals. Not now, maybe later. I'm busy. When you say those words, they don't sound cruel. They sound responsible, sensible, necessary, but they add up. I used to think that the big mistakes were what killed a life. Affairs, addiction, abandonment. Well, I didn't do any of those things. I was faithful, hardworking, dependable. And yet here I was, sitting alone at a kitchen table at 82, discovering that the distance between me and people who mattered to me had been widening for years. You can be surrounded by family and still feel separate. It happens quietly. You miss one conversation because you're tired. You skip one recital for a meeting and they only ever mention it in passing. You opt for another hour at the office rather than one more story at bedtime. Each choice feels small, reasonable, until one day nobody's home. I don't resent my children for living their lives. That's what I trained them to do. I encourage them to pursue opportunities, to work hard, to build something meaningful. They listen. I sometimes wonder if they'll also, in some other kitchen many years from now, feel what I felt that night. I hope not. I hope that they were learning something different by watching me. Some things cannot be changed now. Thomas is gone. The children's childhoods are gone. My body is slower. I'm not as good a listener as I used to be. I can't go back and do those walks. I am able to call my daughter more frequently, and I do. I ask about her garden. I listen longer, and I try not to shoo her off the phone. But there's a difference between maintaining what remains and reclaiming what's lost. Certain things only exist in their time. I did not cry on a night that I realized I was alone. That surprised me. I merely sat there and let the truth sink in. This is it, I thought. This is how the rest of my life looks. And strangely enough, there was peace in saying that. No more acting as if I was merely between visits. No more convincing myself that I like the calm. I don't prefer it, but I accept it. If you're hearing me and there's still someone in the next room, or a person who texts good night despite my emoji above, do not think they will always be there. I don't mean scary like that, just a truthful one. Put the laundry down sometimes. Let the email wait. Take the walk. Hang out at the table after the dishes are cleared. Time does not tell when it is about to run out. It just keeps going, steady as that clock above my stove. If this meant something to you, I'm happy. I didn't share my story to make you sad. I told it because I wish someone had told it to me. It's late now. The rain has stopped. The house is quiet again. I will wash my bowl and turn off the lights, and I'll go to bed on my side of the mattress. And I'll wake up tomorrow and make my coffee for one. That's the life I constructed, bit by bit. Not through disaster, not through cruelty, like just slow it all down and make smart decisions. I was never abandoned. I kept assuming there would be more time. And then one night, I noticed there wasn't.